Okay, so we're going to create a story together. In our story, is there a boy or is there a girl?
There is a girl.
All right. Let's describe the girl. Is the girl fat or skinny?
The girl is fat.
She's fat. All right, so there's a fat girl. Is the girl tall or short?
She's tall.
So there's a tall and fat girl.
Yes.
All right. Where is the girl? Is she at McDonald's, Walmart, Toys R Us? Where is the girl?
She's at McDonald's.
All right, so there's a tall, fat girl at McDonald's.
Yes.
Great. When is she at McDonald's? In the day or at night?
At night.
Okay, at night. And what is she doing? Is she eating? Is she cleaning? Is she drinking? What is she doing at McDonald's?
She is eating a hamburger.
All right, she's eating a hamburger. So the fat, tall girl is eating a hamburger at McDonald's in the day. Did you say in the day?
At night.
Oh, at night. At night. All right. And there's a problem. Okay. So the girl has an accident. What happens? What happens? The girl has an accident. Is it with the hamburger? Does the girl have an accident with the hamburger? Or does the girl have an accident with another person? Or does the girl on her own, does she fall? What happens?
She fell.
Alright, she fell. Did the girl break, did she break a bone?
Yes.
Alright, which bone did she break? Did she break her arm, hand, foot, leg?
Her leg.
She broke her leg when she fell.
Yes.
Okay, so, there's a girl, right? She's, let's see if we remember. She's tall and fat. She's at McDonald's at night, eating hamburgers, and she falls and she breaks her leg, right? Okay.
Yes.
She breaks her leg, and in how many parts does her leg break?
2 parts.
Her leg breaks in 2 parts.
Yes.
Okay, that's a normal break. Alright, great. That is collaborative storytelling in a nutshell. Now what we could do is have the character go to a new place and have another accident happen and she breaks another part of her body. Or we could start again with a new character and have that person break some part of his body, her body. The only idea I really had at the beginning of the story was I was going to create a character and I had an idea of what the problem was going to be, that there was going to be an accident, she was going to break something. Other than that, I was really just asking questions to add more details and further the storyline. In this example, we used a fictional character, but before or now or during, I could get information from the students, their who, what, when, where, why, hows, of events when they themselves are broken bones or they know someone who has broken a bone. And we could use that information to compare and contrast, and I can share my own experiences. Now, have you ever broken a bone?
No, I have not.
Do you have a friend or a family member who has broken a bone?
Yes, I have a friend.
Okay, what's his or her name?
Her name is Gustavo.
Alright, so Gustavo broke what bone did he break?
His nose.
He broke his nose. Alright, when did Gustavo break his nose?
20 years ago.
20 years ago. Alright, in the past. So 20 years ago, Gustavo broke his nose. Where was he?
He was at home.
He's at home. And how did he break his nose?
He fell.
He fell. He fell like the girl in the story?
Yes.
So they both fell, and that's how they broke their bone. All right. Thank you. Now, I'll tell you about a story, my personal story. I've broken a bone. Do you know what bone I've broken?
No, I don't know.
I broke my pinky, my small finger here. How do you think I broke my bone? Did I fall? Like Gustavo?
Maybe.
No, I didn't fall. It was I was playing basketball. Where was I playing? Where do you think I was playing basketball?
At school, maybe?
Yeah, it was at the school. It was during actually basketball practice in the gym, and the ball hit my finger and it broke my finger. It was about 15 years ago when it happened. You can practice collaborative storytelling with your friends and family in your first language. So, my name is Eric Herman, and this is my low-budget production of a short training video on collaborative storytelling. I would like to demystify and simplify the activity that is at the core of a foreign language and second language teaching method called Teaching Proficiency through Reading and Storytelling, known in short as TPRS. I want to look at TPRS in a new light, from a new perspective. I want to see TPRS as collaborative storytelling and put it into the greater context of role-playing games. If you grasp the concept of role-playing games, then you will see how easy it is to do. That demo didn't look hard, did it? Whenever we answer the question, what if? And we do so with another person, we hash out the scenario, then we are engaging in collaborative storytelling. These can be mundane stories in which we play our real-life selves, such as when a mom asks her kid, "What if a stranger knocks on our door?" And the kid responds, "Well, I tell him that he can't come in." And then the mom proceeds and she asks, "And what if he says to let him in because he's a friend of the family?" And the kid hopefully responds something like, "Well, I'll go get you or Dad." Maybe the mom continues, she says, "Well, what if we're not home at the moment?" And so forth. That is, in essence, collaborative storytelling. Now, some history. I don't have to tell you that telling stories is as old as time, but I just did. Creating and imagining scenarios and stories together is probably just as old. There are tons of card games, dice, and board games based around collaborative storytelling because it's so much fun. Before I knew about TPRS, I remember trying to play Rory's Story Cubes and Tailcraft, a card game, to create stories together with my students. But you don't really need any materials, and I bet many of you have played the game in which one person in a circle starts a story and maybe says a sentence, and the next person continues the story, and so forth. The result is some silly, wacky story. There is a similar writing game called Write, Fold, Pass. And do you remember reading those choose-your-own-adventure books as a kid? Or maybe filling out Mad Libs? That in those instances, the author sets up these guidelines, but it is up to you to make the decisions, and together a story is created. Perhaps the best known type of collaborative storytelling is known as role-playing games, called a RPG for short. The most commonly known role-playing game is Dungeons & Dragons, but there are tons of games out there. Basically, players assume fictional roles, and there is a set of rules unique to the specific RPG that guide character development and decision-making. It is the set of game rules and role-playing which make RPGs a special type of collaborative storytelling. In so-called tabletop RPGs, the players discuss their roles and may speak as their characters, rather than act their roles. But there are also live-action RPGs. I would like to take a look at TPRS as one system of a role-playing game. A closer look at RPGs will provide us with a framework for understanding TPRS, as well as give us fresh ideas about how to interact in our classrooms and how to train teachers to be game masters. Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D for short, is more than 40 years old. It was created in 1974 by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and I highly recommend you go to YouTube channel Tabletop Terrors, and you search for videos titled Learn to Play D&D. These are videos from last month, they're recent, and so there are only 2 videos so far in the series. There are these 2 brothers going over the essentials to being able to start playing D&D today. The videos may as well be called Learn to Play an RPG, or better yet, Learn TPRS. The brothers have great advice. One thing they say is super important, and something they wish they had been told from the get-go, is that there is no wrong way to do it. Remember that, teachers. You don't really need any rules or training. Understanding the concept behind the game is enough to start playing in the classrooms now. There are some basics to D&D and other RPGs, which generally include three things. First, the creation of characters. The session starts with this. Players get a character sheet, and there are a few rules that guide the process of filling in the character qualities and ability statistics. This first step has always been the first step of collaborative storytelling in TPRS. The TPRS curriculum, Look, I Can Talk, spends every first day of a story on establishing background information about characters and setting. The second essential of role-playing games is that there is one person with the special responsibility to set the scene, ask the questions of the players, referee the rules and decision-making, narrate the player decisions and outcomes, and play the role of any non-player characters. This narrator-referee is called the Game Master. In D&D, they're called Dungeon Masters. This is the teacher's role in TPRS. The amount of pre-planning of the story depends on the RPG and also depends on the person. Just because there's a lot of planning doesn't mean there isn't plenty of room for player decisions. D&D has a book of guidelines just for the Dungeon Master, as well as a manual for players. The guidebook Fluency Through TPR Storytelling serves as a kind of manual for teachers doing TPRS. And the third essential of role-playing games is that the players are improvising, making up answers on the spot and deciding on their intentions and actions. In some RPGs, such as D&D, dice get rolled to objectively determine the outcome of a player's decision. Here is something we can take and immediately apply in our classrooms. In 2012, Adam Koebel and Sage Latora invented a rules-light, story-focused version of Dungeons & Dragons. They call it Dungeon World. The play kit is only 33 pages. The guidebook is 59 short pages. Both are online and free downloads. The rules are less and they are simpler. It is part of the game philosophy that the game master not overplan, leaving plenty of room for the players to shape the world and adventures. It would be easier for a game master to start running a game of Dungeon World than it would be to start running Dungeons & Dragons. This is also the purpose of this video, to present a simplified rule set, the essential subset of TPRS, so that teachers can go into their classrooms tomorrow and be successful at collaborative storytelling. There is much that can be learned from Dungeon World. The game motto is, play to find out what happens. In other words, the purpose is to create and enjoy the story. It's not about winning. One of the principles listed for Game Masters is ask questions and use the answers. Game Masters often ask their characters, what do you do? This is exactly what is already done in TPRS, and it is termed story asking, a term coined by Jason Fritz. Game Masters have been story asking since the beginning of RPGs in the 70s. Dungeon World uses a system of rules known as Powered by the Apocalypse, because these guidelines were first used in an RPG in 2010 called Apocalypse World. There is one specific guideline that pertains to player decisions and outcomes. That is, that players roll 2 6-sided dice to determine their actions. A sum between 1 and 6 means that the player fails to get what he wants. A 7 to 9 means there's partial success, but there's got to be a cost. And a 10 or higher means the character has complete success. Again, this is something that would be easy to include in our collaborative classroom storytelling. Dungeon World gives the game master and players lists of their moves, basically categories of actions that players can take. They are intended more as suggestions than they are rules to follow. The Game Master also has the option to outline before play starts some of the problems and dangers that could occur during the adventures. These are called fronts. There is lively discussion within TPRS teacher circles right now over the amount of planning that should be done before collaborative storytelling. I will remind teachers, there is no wrong way to do it. Those game masters who have meticulously planned out the adventure are not running games that are any less enjoyable. So the golden rule is, do what best helps you to guide students in creating an enjoyable story. Now it's your turn. Go geek out. I did. Go to YouTube channel Roleplay R&D and watch 5 people playing 20 or more hours of Dungeon World. Observation and experience are the best teachers. What astonishes me is how Blaine Ray invented TPRS in the mid-80s and how TPRS evolved independently of RPGs, and yet they share so much in common. That's because they have both figured out what works in collaborative storytelling. Actually, 25 years ago, in 1991, Stephen Krashen, a world-renowned second language acquisition researcher and linguist, promoted and discussed the use of role-playing games in the classroom. He said in the book Fundamentals of Language Education, "The fullest potential of games is reached in role-playing games." Why do we want collaborative storytelling and role-playing games in a world language classroom? If your goal is for students to acquire the language, meaning an unconscious language system gets set up in their heads, and the goal is for students to develop proficiency, meaning communicative ability, then contemporary science supports comprehension-based approaches, a type of communicative approach that would best fulfill these goals. The teacher's goal during class is thus, keep communicating and maximize the time that students spend comprehending input. The 2 pillars upon which achieving that goal depend are 1. Meaningful content, and 2. Interaction. If the content is meaningful, then it will have that intrinsic motivation for students to want to communicate. It will also increase their active intention to comprehend the input. Interaction is a pillar because interaction makes input more comprehensible. In the early stages of acquiring a new language, the acquirer will use minimal verbal and plenty of nonverbal responses in order to interact. That's fine. Collaborative fiction, created by students, leads to meaningful interaction better than anything. Remember that the goal of the activity is not to teach language. Language acquisition and proficiency are the byproduct, the result of communicating about something. The goal is to enjoy the cooperative creation of a story. The means is the ends. That is, it's all about the process. It's an activity, but also a storytelling game. Like Dungeon World says, we play the game to find out what happens. There doesn't have to be an additional purpose. When we hang out with our friends and talk about the past weekend, for example, we enjoy finding out something or retelling and remembering what we already know. But often, we do not do anything with that learned information. Similarly, why do we read? Often it's just to enjoy the story. That is, the purpose is entertainment. We can also reframe collaborative storytelling as a task-based approach. A task being something you do with the information you learn. The syllabus then looks like macro, long-term tasks with mini-tasks leading up to them. What you do with the story in the macro task is read it, discuss it, maybe retell it, or maybe write your own version. The mini-tasks can be conceived of as the individual story elements. Examples are characters and setting, and the task is to take the details and decisions made by the student, players, and audience to compose the narration of that particular element. An assessment trend happening in world language education right now is can-do statements. The purpose is to make class more communicative and proficiency-oriented by taking the emphasis off what students know about language and emphasizing what students can communicate. It's easy to take the main problem in a story and reword that as a can-do statement. For example, let's say you plan to create a story about breaking a bone, like the demonstration. So the can-do is, I can talk about breaking bones. Notice, though, that whether you conceptualize collaborative storytelling as an activity, task, game, or can-do statement, this does not change what you actually do during the storytelling. Now, since this is collaborative storytelling for the language acquisition classroom, we have to mention some heavy-hitter teacher techniques that will achieve the teacher goal of maintaining communication and maximizing comprehension. Let communication and comprehension be your guide. We can put comprehension maximizing techniques into 2 main categories. 1, extralingual support. That is, what is external to the language that helps us understand it. And 2, characteristics of the input. Those techniques of the extralingual support category include the use of translation, pictures, and actions. Translation can be in the form of subtitles or as simple as glosses, in which an approximate first language equivalent is given. By actions, I mean that the teacher can gesture what he is saying and can also narrate for students to gesture or act what is being said. Characteristics of the input that maximize comprehension include speaking slowly and using shorter sentences. Length of a sentence is acknowledged as a way to calculate how easy or difficult it is to read something, the number of words and syllables in a sentence being used in readability formulas. The most important technique and characteristic of the input that affects comprehension is vocabulary. It's not the grammar, the word order or word endings that are usually going to impede communication. It's usually the inability to link a meaning of a content word to its form. The TPRS mantra is right on. Shelter vocabulary, not grammar. Shelter means limit. Limit the word net or level. Create stories within mostly the known word net. It is commonly recommended, for instance, that you read multiple books from the same graded reader level. Each level is written within the same word net, before moving on to the next graded reader level. Studies show that comprehension is not adequate with more than 5% new words in the input. Students don't have to master new words in the sense that they can fluently comprehend them, sometimes called fast processing, before you move on to new words. Staying within the word net will ensure that you incidentally, not intentionally, get repetitions, which will build fluency over time. By gradually expanding the net of new words, and even camping out at a net level for multiple collaborative storytelling sessions, then you will get tons of incidental repetition. Another way to shelter input is to target, which means to try to get a lot of reps of a word or phrase in a short period of time. In other words, intentionally mass repetitions. The result is limited new input. If you listen to speech between mothers and babies, you will hear the mom being repetitive. Who has the ball? Ben has the ball. Does he have the ball? Yes, he does. Ben has the ball, doesn't he? Targeting is an intentional effort from the teacher to recreate this quality of caretaker speech. The main concern I have with this practice is when creating a good story becomes secondary to getting repetitions and trying to practice and teach words and grammar. Targeting can be a double-edged sword, helping you maximize comprehension, but it can also place restrictions that make telling a good story within an already limited set of words that much harder. Other ways to shelter input are to reread stories. TPRS already recommends the story be read after it is created. Even if the collaborative storytelling activity doesn't go all that well, and the teacher has a hard time maximizing the time spent in the target language, there's no reason to worry. You will read and discuss the story in the target language. In fact, in the language experience approach, students relate a personal story to the teacher in the native language, while the teacher types it up, and it is then read in the target language. You also shelter input during the collaborative storytelling process by going back to the beginning, as I did in my demo, to retell what you've created thus far and enjoy what you've created. If the teacher sticks to the day one plan of TPRS, then you'll be recreating characters at the start of every new story and staying mostly within the same language each time. Another powerful way to shelter input is with a patterned plot. Think of the old lady who swallowed a fly, or the three billy goats gruff, as examples of plots that repeat themselves. This gives the teacher an outline, much like what the fronts do for game masters in running Dungeon World. This allows a story to progress, but without needing to expand the word net. TPRS has always done this. The classic example is the three-location story. Then there are teacher scripts by Anne Matava and Jim Tripp that have patterned plots. Rather than repeat a similar scene with the same character, you could always start over with a new character and run him or her through a similar scene or plot. In such patterned plots, the teacher already knows what language will be recurring and essential to comprehension, so it makes no difference whether the teacher goes over those guide words at the beginning of class or as they come up in class. Fluency through TPR storytelling suggests that establishing the meaning of words reactively, that is, as they come up, is more efficient. The only concerns I have with proactive, pre-establishing meaning, a glossing of words, is that this gives away to students what may happen in the story, and this could spoil some of the suspense. Also, if words are predetermined, let's still avoid the temptation to see the teaching of the words and getting repetitions of the words as the primary goal. Now, let's go over the questioning strategies that drive collaborative storytelling and help to shelter input. The number one most important role of the teacher is to ask questions and use the answers. That's how both teacher pillars are achieved: meaningful content and interaction. In fact, one TPRS skill is never making two statements in a row. In other words, there is an equal or greater proportion of questions to statements. There are a couple types of questions classified and labeled by TPRS. The two main types of questions I recommend teachers ask are vertical and horizontal questions. TPRS defines vertical questions as those about the same topic. The questions can get ever more broad or specific in what TPRS calls the ladder of specificity. After vertical questioning a statement like Bob is a boy, it becomes Bob is a skinny and handsome boy with brown hair who is a student. I've seen this type of questioning also represented as a spiral. You spiral from the broad down to the more specific until there's nothing left to ask. So you go on to a new topic or a new spiral. Questions about a new topic are called horizontal questions. In the example, questions about the school Bob goes to would be horizontal questions. This is not an exact science. In an effort to limit the amount of new words in the input, you should be gradually adding details to the same sentence before moving on to a new sentence. This is what TPRS calls expanding the statement. In TPRS, there is also a questioning technique called circling, which gets presented in beginner workshops. And many teachers leave feeling like a large part of class time should be spent on circling. Not so. Circling, as it was originally coined by Susan Gross and also defined in Fluency through TPR storytelling, is a series of questions about a known statement. In real-life communication, when do we ask questions about information that we have already established? For example, when we think we haven't been heard or understood, as in, you can't have a cookie. Hey, son, did I say you could eat that cookie? I didn't think so. Maybe when we want to check comprehension. For instance, okay, so now tell me, what page was that homework on? We also ask questions about known information to confirm that we've heard correctly. So, there was a man on the roof? Did you just say there was a man on the roof? We ask to remember. Who did you say had eaten the last cookie? If the purpose of asking a question about known information is to check comprehension, confirm, and remember, then it's communicative. Remember the baby talk example? The mom was circling. Except that her intention was not to teach words, but to talk in simple speech to her baby. Circling can be a way of targeting input. So the main concern I have with circling is the same I had with targeting, when getting repetition becomes the primary goal. In the case of questioning to target input, you risk setting up a traditional dynamic and traditional role of teacher and student. The teacher trying to get reps will likely be perceived by students as asking questions to teach students something and to practice language, rather than communicate and comprehend a good story. In collaborative storytelling, it is best the adult play the role of game master, a facilitating and guiding participant in the conversation, rather than the role of a language teacher. To sum up, here are the main takeaways from this video. If the goal is acquisition and proficiency development, then a classroom will be communicative and comprehension-based. The best way we facilitate that in a classroom is through activities that create meaningful interaction. Collaborative storytelling does that best. The communicative goal is to enjoy the creation process and enjoy the final story. Don't fall back into traditional roles of trying to teach and practice language. TPRS is a kind of role-playing game. There is a lot we can learn from existing role-playing games. In a role-playing game, you co-create characters, ask questions about details and plot, and have a way of determining the answers and outcomes. The teacher's role is to run a role-playing game, that is, to become the game master. There is no wrong way to do it. Plan as much or as little as you need to create a good story. The main thing that the teacher does is ask questions. Expand statements with lots of vertical questioning. Ask questions about old facts in order to check comprehension, confirm and clarify details, and recall information in the story that you may have genuinely forgotten. Do what you have to do to maximize comprehension. One super important way of doing that is to shelter the amount of new words. Two of the best ways of doing that are to use patterned plots and to stay within the same word net for a few collaborative storytelling sessions. Give the meaning of words whenever necessary to facilitate comprehension. Upon concluding a story, enjoy reading and discussing the final product. In conclusion, in your acquisition classroom, start asking questions to find out what is going to happen.